mes amis. Nous sommes d'ici encore une fois. Et nous allons alors Phil and Ted's
Sexy Boomer Show.
And now, I did that for the Canadians. Of course, you have to always speak a little French. Il faut parler français aussi si on veut être Canadien, en fait, if you really want to be a real Canadian. And don't we all?
Yes. Je suis Ted Bonnet.
And je suis Philippe Proctor.
Welcome.
And we have another in-studio guest.
Je m'appelle Adele.
Oui, elle appelle Adele Abrams.
Welcome to continuing coverage of the
Cuckoo.
Our guest today, one of our guests, author Judy Gumbo,
wrote a book about the topic we're going to be talking about today.
That's right.
Which is survival in a time of tyranny.
We're in the midst of a coup.
It's a slow coup.
Well, it's been
it's pretty fast.
That's what's interesting about it to me. It's like a slow motion coup that is now triple speed, warp speed. I'm looking at this whole thing like a horror sci-fi comedy series, okay? And I've named it Old Glory. We're watching the CV reality series Old Glory. Okay, and that's the only way that I think I'll be able to get through this. You know.
Well, it's so upsetting to see that the groundwork that was laid in terms of Citizens United funding.
It's really Citizens Untied.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Trump was the perfect guy to sell the executive branch to the highest bidder, and he found him, the richest man in the world. And isn't it curious that the Roberts Court also laid the groundwork to preemptively make Trump immune from criminal prosecution?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just say, oh, this is just coincidence.
No. The series is fun, but it's based on a book called, I think, Project 2025?
Oh, 2025.
Project 2025. But for you, 1998. All right, so.
Let's draw the picture here. What can we do?
What can we do?
I mean, already people are exercising their First Amendment rights. There have been protests in downtown Los Angeles in the last few days. Yeah, which is against the immigration policy.
Yep. And I love the idea of having like a national immigrant work stoppage day where every immigrant, just whether you're a CEO or a gardener, you say, I'm not going in today, man.
There were over 1,000 people on the streets last night again. About 200 of them were arrested. Now, there was some behavior like cars doing donuts and a firearm being discharged.
But I like donuts.
Fireworks.
What is the problem?
Fireworks aimed at a police helicopter.
Oh, that's not good.
These people got arrested.
Not cool, dude. It's not cool.
Remember LBJ said that the only thing he really feared were the power of the people during the protests in the late 60s.
That's right.
Today, we're going to talk about practical ways to legally protest.
We the people, by the people, for the people, screw the people.
So let's bring our guests in. Shall we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, I hear a
hear
voice in my head.
We have Judy Gumbo Albert, author of Yippie Girl, Exploits in Protest and Defeating the FBI. She became a target of the FBI in her civil protest actions back in the 60s. And Arthur Eckstein, author of Bad Moon Rising.
Author's an Arthur or Arthur's an author?
Arthur. Bad Moon Rising, How the Weather Underground Beat the FBI and Lost the Revolution. Welcome.
Thank you.
They're together, literally. They're husband and wife.
Okay.
And they're
That is true too.
And they're graciously taking time from their vacation to join us.
Where are you guys?
We are in a place called Sea Ranch on the California coast.
Oh, I've been there.
It's a wonderful, wonderful, very relaxing place.
Yes.
And it's a great way to spend the crazy times because we can get a little distant from it. By the way, you should know, in terms of your introduction, that I am a Canadian.
De quelle partie du Canada?
Très bien, merci.
Wait, no, de quelle partie? Obviously not Montreal. Because I said, what part of Canada did you come from?
I'm from Tirana.
Toronto.
Yeah, if you move the letters around, it's not Toronto or not to.
That's right.
Right?
Judy, you got your name Judy Gumbo from Eldridge
Cleaver?
Yeah, well,
that's correct.
Eldridge Cleaver. That's right.
Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party back in my day.
Okay, so you went to Berkeley in 1968 at the tender age of 24.
Right.
And you immediately became involved in the Youth International Party, a.k.a. the Yippies, which was an anti-war satirical protest group. You were rapidly found yourself in the center of countercultural activity, from protests in People's Park to meetings at Black Panther headquarters. You ran a pig for president during the historic protests of the 68.
Remember. Oh, that was you, huh?
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, we've done worse since then, huh?
Why fake it?
Well, okay, so you ran that at the DNC in Chicago in '68, which was a historic convention that, of course, devolved into violent attacks by the police and the arrests that led to the notorious Chicago conspiracy trial. So you were in your fight. You were close with famous radicals like Jerry Rubin, Anita and Abbie Hoffmann, Eldridge Cleaver, Paul Krasner, and Stu Albert. What drove you to street protests? What were the results and the consequences you faced? And I'm asking you this in the context of what people who are out there want to do something, what they should do and how they should do it lawfully.
Well, the way you phrased the question makes it pretty difficult, because the times when we were protesting in Chicago '68 are very different than the current time, but also very similar. So I think that the main reason that I did it, and many of my compatriots did, was because it was fun.
Okay.
It was fun, and we knew we were having an effect on not just the people who were the people who were there to protest, but on the government and on long-term issues. And we raised, because we were also raising political issues.
That's right.
But it was fun.
But you traveled to North Vietnam during the war. You traveled the globe to promote women's liberation, anti-war protests, and also, quite early on, the environmental activism movement. Your work drew the attention of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI when he was still running the show.
Suck it up!
So you became a so-called victim of the FBI, didn't you, for having all this fun?
Well, but I didn't think of myself as a victim. I thought of myself as an activist, and there's a big difference. I'm just trying to remember there's a quote that I have, which is, I think, in Yippie Girl in my book.
You're the most vicious and
The most vicious, the most anti-American, the most
subversive.
Your husband has memorized this. I see.
He's heard it so many times he doesn't have a choice.
All right, so you were bad-mouthed, right, babe?
I was badass.
Bad mouthing.
Hoover himself.
Yep.
Okay, so this kind of sets up, Judy, who you are. Your lovely half-side, Arthur Eckstein, is the author of Bad Moon Rising, How the Weather Underground Beat the FBI and Lost the Revolution, which you can find on Amazon, by the way. This book came out in 2016. You really took a deep dive into researching 30,000 pages of previously unreleased FBI documents about the Weather Underground's activity, which is nicknamed Weather. Tell us briefly, for folks who don't know, what the Weather Underground was.
The Weather Underground was a radical group that engaged first in demonstrations and then in dynamite bombing.
Next to Dustin Hoffman's house.
They intentionally never killed anybody. They always gave warnings, and they attacked police stations and the State Department and the headquarters of Anaconda Copper and places like that. And the FBI became obsessed with them. They were actually about 100 college students, and they became obsessed with them. They think there were 1,000 activists and 5,000 supporters. That's what they told themselves in secret documents, and they were totally crazy. That wasn't, they were a tiny little group, and I really would not call them terrorists. It was armed resistance, but they certainly were not terrorists. They didn't intend, after the first couple of months, they did not intend to kill anybody. They made a decision right up here, 3 hours north of San Francisco, where we are, not to kill anybody.
And they didn't.
Yeah, and the FBI made an absolute priority of capturing them, and they never caught anybody.
Wow.
And you wouldn't believe it, just.
But the backdrop of that is back in those days in the '60s, bombings. This is the Hearst kidnapping, all the activity back then in the Bay Area. Bombings were a regular thing almost at that time. Wasn't
So was
it?
getting bombed.
Yeah. Well, sure, everybody was getting bombed. They were certainly getting bombed. themselves, yeah.
So
And then they got bummed.
You've got 100 stoned college students setting off bombs. That's all. And
Really bizarre. And as I interrupted you rudely to say, the reason, one of the things that brought them to national attention was that one of their bomb-making basements was next to Dustin Hoffman's
in New York.
brownstone in New York.
Yeah.
And it blew up. And, of
Right.
course, so suddenly, Dustin was playing a major role again. And everybody got to know who the.
They
But
blew
now
up in
let me ask you: did their name come from the Bob Dylan song?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yep.
You don't need a
weatherman
Meant to know which way the wind blows. Absolutely.
Blues. Yeah.
So ultimately, now looking back 50, 60 years, what do you see your efforts having accomplished in terms of pushing forward American
agenda
values and rights?
Freedoms.
Are you asking Art and me or both
Yes,
of
yes. No, asking you both.
Are you asking Art and me or both of us? That's a good question, said the Siamese twin.
Right. I think we accomplished was inspiring many people to take action that suited them. The point is, you didn't have to do what someone else told you. You had to figure out what is it that I can do that will make a difference that suits me, and whether it was simply being part of a large protest group or engaging in a different, more radical activities, more difficult activities. The point was you were part of a social movement who was there to make a difference.
Present day, which is an entirely different landscape and entirely different political situation, obviously, but there's so much more difficulty because we have the internet and the social media sphere, which has divided and conquered more than anything else. And now we also live deep in a surveillance society. Younger people who might go out and protest are being warned not to do it because of facial recognition technology might just come up when you're looking for a job in 2 years. So what do? Put a bag over your head, or do you do peaceful First Amendment protected protests that might result in some positive change that won't hold you back in the future?
Judy was certainly under surveillance.
Absolutely.
The FBI illegally burgled her little cabin in the Catskills 7 times in 1 year.
Good
She's actually the champion of illegal burglary. And they also bugged her house and tapped her phone and put a tracker on her car.
Which I found.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
well, now we all have that.
Well, I've got bugs in my car.
Yeah.
And
I should talk
we
to my
willingly
mechanic.
allow ourselves to be trapped.
so she was used to surveillance, but yet you had jobs at university.
Right. I mean, I think the point is to look at what is happening and say, how can I get beyond it, and how can I make a difference, even given being tracked? And I mean, it was scary. There's no question. When I found the tracking device on the bumper of my car, the first thing I did was go to see Bill Kunstler, the lawyer, and Margie Ratner, and said, "Help! What is this? What can we do?" And they were so pleased. Bill said, "I believe this is the first time someone has ever found one of these."
And you went on to go after the FBI for what they did to you, and you won that battle, didn't you?
Absolutely, we did.
How did you do that?
Lawyers.
Yeah.
Lawyers, guns, and money.
Yeah, exactly. Lawyers are very good in situations like this.
They're very good now.
That's
Lawyers
right.
are very good now.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, because
kind
what
of the last line of defense, it looks like.
the situation that we're facing now is entirely different, and in a way, so more insidious. Because since Reagan first came to power, $50 trillion have been lifted from the middle class and put into the pockets of the very few. Is that because the Democrats sold out too, and they just represent corporatists? Where's the resistance?
That is a really, really good question. And I think the problem is that people are scared. and people are wussy. And the last number of years has created that, and the very few people who are willing to take risks are in a much more difficult situation than we were, even though people, that we know, especially the Panthers, got killed for taking certain kinds of risks.
Right. That's right.
So it's a very difficult situation, but I don't think it means that you have to give in. I think it means you have to keep pressing for the righteous and the good, and you have to be willing to take risks yourself in order to make that happen.
Okay.
It's still early days.
Yes.
The original protests against the Vietnam War were small, but by 1969, it was 500,000 people in the streets twice, and that was done without the internet.
Right.
That was organized without that kind of internet stuff. Mm-hmm. We're early days in the administration. The lawyers are doing much, but it's going to take organization to get large numbers of people in the streets. And Judy's right that the size of those demonstrations had an effect on government policy in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And we actually stopped that war. At one point, I met with Madame Binh, who was basically the peace negotiator for the North Vietnamese, and she said, "We won the war, but you helped. You being the anti-war movement." And that's something we should never forget, that we were very critical in ending that horrific war.
Absolutely.
Now, tomorrow's 50 states, 50 capitals, 50 marches.
But I would say if that works, great. If it doesn't, start over again. It's early days.
Right.
It's early days. People are just stunned at the moment. But,
but let's talk about what's going on in D.C. right now, where you have an unelected billionaire, the richest man in the world, bringing in kids who probably don't understand the crimes they're committing.
You talking about lone schmuck? I mean,
yes.
Elon Musk?
And they're bringing in their own private servers, plugging into the heartbeat of the country's payment systems and pulling the data out of not only just employees of the government, but everyone, kids who have student loans, people on Medicaid, Medicare. They're pulling all that data, including Social Security numbers. The question is, now that they are essentially privatizing that information, putting it into the hands of Elon Musk, who is trying to curry favor with the Chinese because of his business dealings, because he's a globalist in that respect.
At least he's not currying favor with the Indians.
Just how do you address that? Go ahead, Adele.
Yeah. Well, this is particularly insidious because on one hand, through OMB, or for Office of Personnel Management and OMB, he's got all of the information on federal employees. He can cancel them out with the change of code. But for the rest of us, it's not just, those couple of things. And I actually posted something earlier summarizing some of the things that these tech bros, who are 19 to 24 years old, have the ability to do at
the
Lone Schmuck's direction. They can freeze not only personal but corporate bank accounts, because anytime you have an ACH, if you had a PPP loan, it's linked to your corporate account. They have input and exput into that now. They can pause and withhold direct deposits, such as our Social Security payments that, I'll be looking to see what happens on the 15th.
Social insecurity.
They can alter the amount of Social Security that you receive. They can sell and share our personal information, manipulate credit scores. They can add money to an account for nefarious reasons and accuse you of...
I just want to say that I don't think it does much good to make a long list of the problems. I think all it does is create fear. If you're going to talk about problems, I really encourage you to talk about solutions or not talk about the problems.
Good. Amen.
Judy's FBI file is 1,300 pages long. She never had a misdemeanor. She never violated the law at all because she was afraid of the Canadian being deported. And when we went to the National Archives and we told the Freedom of Information guy, Judy's FBI file is 1,300 pages long, he looked at us and said, "Oh, is that what you think?"
No.
So and Judy's answer is don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to talk about and list what is terrible, it's really important to come up also with an alternative and a solution. And I don't know that I know what it is, but that is worth talking about, in my opinion.
And there, there's obviously intent to blindside and blitzkrieg.
But may I just talk about that for a minute? Marcia McLuhan pointed out that a bombardment of too much information makes one numb and confused and fearful. We have had the first 100 days in a day with this guy, which puts us in a daze. Mm-hmm. And it makes everything sound insurmountable.
Programs like this one, where people can talk about it both with each other and with people they haven't talked about, like you guys talking with us or we talking with you, that is the kind of thing that will stir others to think things through and to act. And that's why I think it's a very good thing that you're doing, because I know for myself right now, I feel, I could do something beyond what I'm doing to make a difference. And that is what the point is of all this from our side.
I think also realizing what's going on and trying to critically think through this. I mean, let's not forget this DEI obsession is really about white male supremacy.
Absolutely.
And legitimizing racism. And the fact that he would use that opportunity of that terrible crash in the Potomac to politicize.
There's no depths that he will not sink to.
No.
There is a website called Your Mom Is So Berkeley. And Judy's daughter had an entrance on there saying, my mom is so Berkeley.
That's all she said.
That's right. But that shows the impact of the culture. That there are 9,000 people who subscribe to that website.
Wow. And
they all have moms. So what this is about is the long-term impact of culture. Culture comes first, then politics. Politics is downstream from culture. The cultural changes, that's what they're really fighting with DEI, the cultural changes that have evolved over time.
And my prediction is that the DEI will fade for a while, but it will not go away. It will come back.
Oh, that's right. It's code for the racist attack on
exactly
the world, basically.
You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. Adele Abrams is with us, who is our friend who's been on the show a few times, who is a
former DJ.
Former rock and roll DJ, former protester, activist back in the 70s.
I'm still a protester.
And now she
works. But it goes back, I mean, all of this is kind of memory lane. When I was at University of Maryland in the early 70s during the Vietnam protests, we were tear gassed. I was trapped inside the administration building as a reporter for WMUC, broadcasting from inside the lockup there. And, it seemed like everybody had the anarchist cookbook, on their bookshelf.
But you then became a prominent lawyer in D.C. representing labor, right?
I mean, I'll tell you, with what's happening with the federal workforce and being based in D.C., I have an awful lot of friends who are being affected by this directly. Some of them who were in DEI type of roles in HR and other things who've already lost their jobs.
Yeah.
And
think of the local economy.
Very, very scary. But what they're saying, it'll devastate the whole DMV, as we call it, D.C., Maryland, Northern Virginia.
Housing prices.
Housing. But, the thing for anybody who might be a federal employee listening, read the fine print. There was a second email that went out, and they make it clear our continuing resolution is ending March 14th. There is no money assured after that. So if you give your resignation, they're not guaranteeing to pay you beyond that date. If you don't give your resignation, and if you're a union member, solidarity forever, you will be protected. They will negotiate. They will sue on your behalf. The fine print says you are waiving your right to ask for any kind of hearing under the Merit Systems Protection Board, and that this agreement can be altered at any time. It's an illusory promise. It also doesn't mention that you may be forfeiting accrued pension benefits and your rights under COBRA, your right to lateral to another agency. You agree you will never apply for a federal job again. They encourage you to get a new
Wow.
job in the private sector. Notice the words. Words are very
Privatization.
important. All I can say is I'm anticipating I'm going to be doing some pro bono work for federal employees, helping them thread their way through this really horrible maze.
Okay, and I want to ask
with.
our guests.
Our guest, Judy Gumbo Albert, author of Yippie Girl, Exploits and Protest of Defeating the FBI, and Arthur Eckstein, author of Bad Moon Rising, How the Weather Underground Beat the FBI and Lost the Revolution.
Well, the first thing I want to ask is, did you guys meet through a protest?
Judy and I were in the same protests at Cal in '69.
See?
But we met because Judy was asked to blurb the book that I had done on this.
Oh, great.
And our first interaction was a stern email from Judy saying footnote 43 and chapter 3. That's you wrongly attribute this quote. And nothing's hotter for an academic.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, one of the things that I noticed listening to Adele talk about the complications of all of these things, and I think that one of the tools that the fascists are using to confuse us is by putting everything in a strange double talk legal language, which of course George Orwell, certainly predicted. And there's a language of obfuscation. Aren't you aware of it? How difficult it is sometimes to really understand what is happening to us, what they're doing to us.
Oh, absolutely. It's very hard. And that's why what Trump and his minions are doing is creating a full employment for lawyers program. Mm-hmm. Because that is, I mean, those of us who are not trained in legalisms, we can go so far, but we can't really complete.
You can't articulate it or
what we need to grasp. And we're not lawyers, and we're not going to be lawyers. At least those of us who are in our 80s, we're not going to be lawyers, sadly, but we're not. But there's got to be. We've got to find those people who are, especially younger people who are lawyers, who are like my daughter's a lawyer, and who are training to be lawyers, so that they can take this burden from us, because we are not really capable of making legalistic arguments that will stick. I wish we were.
We also have to make sure that we are working with lawyers who are not liars. Lawyers who are standing up for the truths that are so important right now to defend our democracy.
Another aspect of this of the strategy is you can take them to court and you can win, and there'll be some sort of reparations and a settlement.
Right.
Those people are still out of the job.
That's right.
And paying the reparations for this settlement for their illegal actions, that's just the cost of doing business for these guys.
That's right.
What do you do, though, in an environment where the billionaire class now has bought the legacy media? The Washington Post is hardly going hardcore on this with Bezos in charge. And you have Rupert Murdoch and Larry Ellison sitting in the Oval Office yesterday alongside of Trump. And at the inauguration, you have the three richest men in the world sitting in front of the cabinet. Then you have the cabinet. Then you have a silent majority of Republicans who, despite all of this, what's been happening, the horrors of the last week, they still voted for Kennedy and Tulsi out of committee.
Dr. Cassidy, such a disappointment.
Duly elected senators are denied entrance to the buildings that Musk has seized.
That's right.
They can't even get in.
Almost all of the revolutions, dear friends, that we have kind of been, in history that we studied, are the poor against the rich. Mm-hmm. This is the rich against everybody.
What can we do?
Well, I think that's the right question. I wish I had a good answer for it, but I do know that you have to do something. Acting is what we need to make sure happens. And we can't just give up, and we can't just walk away. Even though we don't know, the only way we're going to know is the way that happened in the 60s. We tried. we tried various things. Some stuff worked, a lot of stuff didn't, but a lot of stuff did.
Let's go back to that moment when you decided to do this. How did you take your first steps?
What's the thing you've got about sexy something or other in
Sexy
your...
boomers. Boomers.
Well, we were sexy boomers. What can I tell you?
There you go. Very good. Well done.
If you think of 1965, the Congress was supine in front of LBJ. The legacy media were all for the war. It takes a while for resistance to build up.
It takes a while, and it takes a constant, continuing effort that's also imaginative and fearless.
Fearless. It takes courage to do these things. Yeah. It takes courage.
But you said you had fun.
And
yeah. But I mean, I was thinking about the People's Park
in Berkeley
in May of '69. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went because my friends were going, and actually I'd started that about 2 years ago. All my friends were going to anti-war demonstrations, and I went to anti-war demonstrations with them. And it was serious. It was fun, but it was serious fun.
That's right.
In Judy's case, I mean, you were actually protesting against the war in '65 in Toronto.
Right. And then I came to the United States and continued to protest and really found a home, because the ideas that people had turned out to be my ideas, and that was making a better world, period. And so that's what we did. And
well, you were a Canadian citizen though, right? Still
am.
So how come they didn't deport you?
They tried.
The FBI tried, and in those days, the INS said, "Oh yeah, well, we can see why you want to deport her, and you have a lot of information on her. Was it gained legally?" That's the term. Was it gained legally? And that was the last the FBI tried that, because it wasn't.
And yet, you said when we spoke yesterday, Judy, that you had this sort of ironic concern for the FBI because of what
it's like they haven't been in this situation where they're being attacked for their beliefs and what they do. And it's like, what? Us? We're the FBI. But there's actually the guy who's the head, I don't know if you know this, but the guy who is now the head of the FBI, Driscoll. The only reason he's the head is that that at a certain point they put his name in and should have put another person's name in, and then they'd never bothered to change it.
That's right. It was a mistake.
Yeah.
Of all the confirmation hearings, Kash Patel, to me, is the most frightening.
Yes.
Later this month, or actually on Monday, the ACLU, and I am a card-carrying member of the ACLU, they're having an online training on how to interact with law enforcement safely, understanding warrants and your search rights, your role as an ally, how to safely intervene, resources and support networks. Some of this is oriented toward the crisis for immigrants, but it's generally a primer on your civil rights. And my God, we need that, because they don't teach that in schools anymore. And there are people, right now who are telling you have no rights. You do. And even though I am a lawyer, I'm going to attend, this training.
I'm sure you feel empowered if you're protesting in the privacy of your own computer. But or iPhone, right? But it's the iPhone. It's just the you phone. It's the me phone. Is it really getting out there, and does it prevent people from stepping out and into the street? We don't have the same kind of friendships we used to have. What do you think?
I think you're right, and it reminds me. I have a friend, Lee Felsenstein, who was one of the inventors of computers.
Ooh.
And I think that getting some information from people like Lee about what can we do with these computers and how can we break them down so that the relationship it becomes humanized again. I think you raise a good point, and I think that has to happen.
But what you're saying is you have to be physically there. It's really a huge thing if you've got 500,000 people in the street.
Remember, after 3 Mile Island's meltdown, the big march on Washington, and of course all the major media downplayed the numbers, as they always do in the protests. But these things made real changes. It changed the conversation.
You have to be physically there.
Judy, you said that while circumstances always change, protesters can stay loyal to the causes they believe in and remain true to themselves.
Exactly.
That's really the experience, I think, of a lot of people that we know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're happy with their lives because they remain true to the ideals when they were young.
Exactly. I think it's time, though, to look at what one of the things Art said, which is the importance of really trying to do what needs to be done, and not sort of getting boxed into various little areas. Oh, I only do this, and I only do that, and I only do that. That's wrong. We have to get back to a integrated movement that takes the important aspects of things and puts them all together.
People are triggered by different things, but what Judy is talking about is bringing it all together.
Right.
Everybody in the civil rights and anti-war movement, they were triggered by individual things that happened, but yet they came together.
Including all the vets.
Including the vets, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who had a much more traumatic experience of the war than those of us who were protesting.
And for you boomers out there who have kids that are now adults, you all feel for their future, right? So here's an opportunity to pay it forward and get active and be there with your kids, for your kids, and maybe turn them on to a little history. Yeah, set an example. And then maybe you won't feel so bad about their bleak outlook. Maybe there's a way, nothing like an action and a reaction to get things going. So we're out of time. I want to thank our wonderful guests. Arthur Eckstein, author of Bad Moon Rising, How the Weather Underground Beat the FBI and Lost the Revolution, which is available on Amazon. And Judy Gumbo Albert, author of Yippie Girl, The Exploits and Protest and Defeating the FBI.
And, I have a sneaky suspicion that if you guys are up for it, we're going to be talking to you some more in the next weeks and months ahead.
Adele Abrams, thank you so much for coming again.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work in Washington.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay sane.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
See you on the streets.
This is Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor.
And together, we will get through this. Stay hopeful.
Keep your voice loud and keep your head down.
See ya.